Okay, here's the question. We are a Christian couple, and although I know it's wrong for me to watch porn by myself, my wife and I have found that watching it together spices up our sex life. Do you think it's okay for couples to watch porn if it's just between the two of them? Well, the short answer is no. Under no circumstances is it okay to watch porn, whatever the context or whatever the goal is that you have in mind. Look, the porn industry is evil. It's not just bad, it's evil. It's exploitive, it's evil. And to watch porn is to participate in that evil. It's to introduce within yourself images that don't belong there. It's to defile yourself. It's to defile your wife, your marriage bed. Evil, it's got no legitimate place in your life, you know? And if it's got no legitimate place in your life, man, it has got no legitimate place in your bedroom. Okay, now some people are a little shocked that this question even came up. I'm not, but I was the first time I heard it. It's been about 15 years since a Christian man said to me, I'm a Christian, my wife's a Christian, I know porn is wrong for me to watch alone, but we found that watching it together makes our sex life hotter, so that's okay, isn't it? And actually, I've heard that question a number of times since then, and I think it's kind of symptomatic of where we are as a culture. The culture has been pornified. I mean, porn's lost its shock value, right? The accessibility factor is so high now that an extremely high percentage of people, including kids, have been exposed to hardcore porn from early in life, and the thing itself is just no longer terribly surprising. Well, when something has lost its shock value, it comes to be seen as common. And then if it's come to be seen as common, it eventually becomes seen as legitimate. And then eventually what is seen as legitimate begins to be seen as a necessity. And that, I think, is why this question has even come up. So let me give you 3 reasons why this is never acceptable for Christian couples to be watching porn together. I mean, first of all, here's the obvious one. What's wrong alone is wrong together. I mean, if something is a sin if you do it by yourself, how can it not be a sin if you're doing it with your wife? And of course, watching porn is a sin. You know what Jesus said about sin and lust, Matthew 5:27. A man so much as looks on a woman to lust after her, he has committed adultery of the heart. Now, his Greek wording there is fairly strong. Looks on her, actually, that's blepo, earnest contemplation, you know. That's not just looking at a woman saying, well, that is an attractive woman. You can't help but notice that. That's not lust. But when you look on her with earnest contemplation, I am really checking this out. And then to lust, epithumeo, that is like to long for, to set your heart on. I not only deeply consider this woman I'm looking at, I set my heart on her, I am inflamed, I'm basically burning for what is not rightfully mine. Now, if that was your wife you were looking on and earnestly desiring, no, that's not lust. That's why I believe it's impossible to lust after your spouse, because that is a legitimized sexual relationship. All sexual desire you have for that person is thereby legitimate. But when you set your heart or your imagination on what is not yours, what is not rightfully yours, someone else, someone you're not married to, that's when it becomes lust. And now you'll notice that Jesus said that is adultery of the heart. That's a sin that defiles someone internally. That's different, of course, than physical adultery. Just like John said in 1 John 3:15, if a man hates his brother in his heart, he's a murderer. He's a murderer in the heart. Well, there's obviously a difference between physically murdering someone and murdering them with your heart. If you're going to kill me, I'd rather you do it with your heart than actually do it in the physical sense. So clearly, from God's perspective, the lust is an internal experience that defiles the man and also is an offense to God. Now, common sense will tell you, of course, if it's wrong alone, it's wrong together. Just as if it's wrong to snort cocaine alone or rob a bank alone, it's wrong to do that with your wife. That's one reason this is unacceptable. Another, think of your role, okay, as a husband. You're the provider, not the defiler. Part of what you took on when you married your wife was the commitment, the responsibility to provide for her needs. So Paul told Timothy, 1 Timothy 5:8, if a man does not provide for his own, especially those of his own house, he has denied the faith and he's worse than an infidel. That says the Word of God has strong things to say about the man who is not properly providing for his wife and his family. Now, one of the things you provide for her of course, is an enhanced environment for her to be the woman of God she's meant to be. So Paul told the Ephesians 5:25-28, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, that he might present the church to himself through the washing of the water and the word as a glorious church without spot or wrinkle. Now think about that. If that's the case, that means that part of what you're to provide your wife with is an environment in which she can spiritually become that separated person, more and more Christ-like, holier, if you will. That's your role, and your role is there to protect her purity before God, not to defile it. Well, shoot, you know that. If you're standing in line with your wife for a movie and someone behind you makes a dirty joke, you're going to probably call him on it. Why? Because that had a defiling effect on your wife who you treasure. Now, if you would do that over a dirty joke, how much more would you want to protect her from the imagery that she would see if the two of you watched porn together? You're there to protect her, not to infect her. So let's get to point number 3, which has a lot to do with the reason for you wanting to do or having done what you've been doing with your wife. It's been hot. It's spiced up your sex life. That means it's gotten very intense. And I believe you. I'm sure watching porn together makes everything more intense. But my third point is intensity is not intimacy. Intensity is not intimacy. So yes, it makes things more intense, but does that justify it? No. Sexual intimacy is about the two of you being brought closer together. It is, of course, for procreation as well, yes, of that, but also for the union between man and wife. I mean, it is meant to be a deeply unifying experience. If there are other women in your bed with you and your wife, no, that's not a unifying experience. You're sharing her body and your body with a bunch of strangers internally, and that isn't what we call intimacy. But I'll grant you it's intense. The question is, does that mean it's good? Certainly doesn't mean it brought you closer together. I mean, I ride roller coasters because I love them. My wife doesn't. So if I go to an amusement park with her, I'm going to ride the roller coaster by myself. I'm going to sit down in that ride and strap in very close to somebody else who will be seated very close to me in that same car. And we are going to share a very intense experience for a few minutes. And when we get off the ride, we're still strangers. Why? Because sharing that intense experience together did not bring us together. Intimacy is not intensity. Intensity is not intimacy. Anything wrong with intensity in sex? No. Good grief. Candidly, I think you should make your sex life as intense as you can, provided that it is a unifying experience that is doing no harm and not defiling either one of you. The Song of Solomon records a very intense, erotic, full-body experience between man and wife. So absolutely, intensity within the framework of godly intimacy, that's a very good thing. But, and this is a big but, when intensity becomes the goal over intimacy, that's when it's problematic. Keep this in mind, okay? Hebrews 13:4, marriage is honorable in all things, and the bed is undefiled. Your bedroom is sacred. It's where you and your wife unite. The sex you have is sacred because sex itself is sacred. It's a sacred thing. You can use a sacred thing in an unholy way. You can defile it that way, but it's still something sacred. It's just you're misusing it. But remember, when God looked on the sexual union he created, when he created Adam and Eve and all their raw, naked sexuality and said, know each other, he applauded that and he said, that's good. That's good. Well, the last thing you want to do is take something which God has declared good and turn it into something unclean. Now, if you'd like to follow up on this, I did write a book called The Game Plan, a 30-day plan for men wanting to attain and maintain sexual integrity. And you can find that on the content description page that came along with this video. Also, if you'd like to talk to me personally about sexual struggles you might be having, be glad to talk with you. Just go to joedallas.com, look on our services page, and you'll find out how to set an appointment with me. And if you'd like to support this ministry with your gifts so we can go on providing free content, just go to joedallas.com/giving. That'll tell you how you can partner with us. Well, I'm Joe, and this is the short answer. Hope it's been helpful to you. God bless.